When Elara Vance dragged a dying wolf through a blizzard instead of obeying orders, she lost everything: her home, her safety, her future. The castle overseer cast her out like garbage. The other servants called her a fool, but that wolf wasn't what it seemed. And the choice she made in that frozen wasteland would shake an entire kingdom to its core. This is the story of a girl who refused to look away, a king who owed her his life, and the betrayal that nearly destroyed them both. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments, hit that like button, and stay until the very end, because this story will leave you breathless. The blizzard hit like the wrath of something ancient and unforgiving. Elara Vance stumbled through knee-deep snow, her arms locked around a burlap sack of dried meat and grain, her breath forming ghost-white clouds that vanished instantly into the howling wind. The cold was a living thing, cruel, relentless, pressing against her chest until every breath felt like swallowing shards of ice. She should never have been out here. The castle stood miles behind her now, its gray stone towers swallowed by the storm. She'd been sent to the southern outpost, a crumbling watchtower where soldiers rotated shifts and survived on rations delivered weekly. It was grunt work, servant work, the kind of task assigned to those who'd angered someone in power. Elara had angered plenty. Her boots slipped on hidden ice beneath the snow. She caught herself, adjusted the sack's weight across her shoulder, and kept moving. The path was invisible now, buried beneath drifts that reached her waist in places. Her fingers were numb inside her worn gloves. Her cloak, patched and threadbare, did almost nothing against the wind. Just keep moving. One foot, then the other. That's when she heard it. A sound, low, guttural, threaded with agony. Elara stopped. The wind shrieked around her, but beneath it, she heard it again. A whimper. Broken. Desperate. No, she whispered to herself. Don't. She knew what happened to people who strayed from the path in storms like this. She'd seen the bodies brought back in spring, frozen solid, faces locked in final terror. The wilderness didn't forgive mistakes. But the sound came again, and Elara Vance had never been good at ignoring suffering. She dropped the supply sack and turned toward the noise, trudging off the path into deeper snow. Her legs burned. The wind clawed at her face. 50 paces. 100. The world was nothing but white and cold and the certainty that she was making a terrible mistake. Then she saw it. A wolf. Massive. Black as a void against the snow. Its body sprawled across the ground, steam rising from wounds that leaked dark blood into the white. One of its hind legs was twisted at an unnatural angle. Foam flecked its muzzle. Its eyes, bright amber, almost golden, fixed on her with an intensity that stopped her heart. Elara had seen wolves before. The kingdom's northern border was wild, untamed, but this creature was enormous, easily twice the size of any wolf she'd encountered. Its shoulders were broader than a man's. Its fangs, visible even through labored breathing, were the length of her fingers. It should have terrified her. Instead, she knelt in the snow beside it. "Easy," she murmured, though her voice shook. "I'm not going to hurt you." The wolf's breathing was shallow, rattling. Its eyes tracked her movements, but it didn't growl, didn't snap. It just watched her with something that looked almost like understanding. Elara's gaze moved to the wounds, deep gashes across its flank, burns, dark necrotic burns that smelled faintly of something chemical, something wrong. Poison. "Who did this to you?" she whispered. The wolf's chest heaved. Its lips pulled back, not in aggression, but in pain. Elara looked back the way she'd come. The path was already invisible. The storm was worsening. The outpost was still miles away. If she left now, she might make it before dark. She could deliver the supplies, report the wolf, and let someone else deal with it. The smart choice. The safe choice. She looked down at the dying creature. Everyone else would walk away. The thought burned in her chest, bitter and familiar. All her life, she'd watched people choose convenience over compassion. She'd seen servants turn their backs on the sick. She'd watched nobles step over beggars freezing in the streets. She'd lived in a world where survival meant learning not to care, and she'd hated it. "Damn it!" Elara hissed through clenched teeth. She shrugged off her cloak and spread it on the snow. Then, gritting her teeth against the impossibility of what she was about to do, She slid her arms beneath the wolf's massive body. The animal whimpered. I know, Elara said. I know it hurts, but I can't leave you here. She lifted, or tried to. The wolf was impossibly heavy, solid muscle and bone, dead weight in her arms. Her legs shook. Her back screamed in protest. She managed to shift the creature onto the cloak, then gripped the fabric's edges like a makeshift sled. And she pulled. The journey back was a nightmare. Every step was a battle against the snow, the wind, the weight of the wolf dragging behind her. Her muscles burned. Her lungs felt like they were filled with ice. Twice, she fell. Twice, she forced herself back up because stopping meant dying, and dying meant the wolf died too. She didn't know why that mattered so much. She just knew it did. Hours blurred together. The world became nothing but white and pain and the rhythmic rasp of the cloak sliding through snow. At some point, she realized she'd lost the supplies. The sack was gone, buried somewhere behind her. She couldn't even remember when she'd let it go. They're going to kill me for this. The thought was distant, detached. She was too cold to care. Finally, she saw light through the storm. Not the outpost. A small cabin, half buried in a snowdrift, smoke rising from its chimney. The healer's hut. Old Marin lived there, a woman who'd patched up soldiers and servants for 40 years and asked no questions. Elara dragged the wolf to the door and collapsed against it, hammering with her fist. Marin. Her voice was a broken rasp. Marin, please. The door opened. An old woman stood there, gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, sharp eyes taking in the scene in an instant. The half-frozen girl, the enormous dying wolf, the desperation written across both. Spirits, save us, Marin breathed. What have you done? Please, Elara gasped. I couldn't leave him. Marin stared at her for a long moment. Then she stepped aside. Get in, both of you, quickly. Together, they dragged the wolf inside. The cabin was small but warm, a fire crackling in the hearth. Marin cleared her workbench with a sweep of her arm, scattering herbs and tools, and they heaved the wolf onto it. Poisoned, Marin said immediately, examining the burns. Nightshade compound. Military grade. She looked at Elara sharply. Where did you find this creature? In the storm. North of the path. This wolf shouldn't exist, Marin said quietly. It's too large, too old. Wolves this size died out generations ago. Can you save him? Marin was silent for a long moment, her weathered hands moving over the wolf's injuries with practiced precision. Maybe, she said finally, but it'll take days. And you... She fixed Elara with a hard look. You were supposed to deliver supplies to the southern outpost. I know. They'll notice you didn't arrive. I know. The overseer will come looking for you. I know, Elara said, her voice cracking. I know what I've done. I know what it costs. But I couldn't... She looked down at the wolf, its breathing shallow but steady. I couldn't just leave him to die. Marin studied her for a long time. Then she sighed, a sound heavy with resigned understanding. You're a fool, girl. I know. And you'll pay for this kindness. I know. Marin turned back to the wolf, pulling vials and bandages from a shelf. Then let's make sure it was worth it. They worked through the night. Marin cleaned the wounds with practiced efficiency, applying poultices that smelled of bitter herbs and something metallic. She stitched the deepest gashes with thread so fine it was almost invisible. She set the broken leg with splints carved from old barrel staves. Elara helped where she could, fetching water, holding the wolf steady when Marin had to cut away necrotic tissue, whispering soothing nonsense when the creature whimpered in pain. Talk to him, Marin said at one point. Animals respond to voice, it calms them. So Elara talked. She talked about the castle, about the endless work and the cold stone halls. She talked about the servants who whispered behind her back, calling her soft, calling her stupid for caring about things that didn't matter. She talked about her parents, dead since she was 12, taken by fever, and how she'd survived by being invisible, by doing what she was told. But I'm tired of being invisible, she whispered, her hand resting on the wolf's massive head. I'm tired of pretending I don't care. The wolf's eyes opened briefly, those strange amber eyes, and looked at her. and for just a moment, Elara could have sworn she saw something human in them. By dawn, the worst was over. The wolf was stable. Its breathing had evened out. The poison was purged. Marin had done everything she could. Now we wait, the old woman said, collapsing into a chair by the fire. Either he survives, or he doesn't. Elara sat on the floor beside the workbench, her back against the wall, too exhausted to move. Thank you, she said quietly. Marin waved a dismissive hand. Don't thank me yet. You've made powerful enemies with this stunt. As if summoned by the words, there was a pounding at the door. Both women froze. Open up, a man's voice barked. By order of Overseer Torin. Elara's blood turned to ice. Marin stood slowly, moved to the door, and opened it just enough to reveal 3 castle guards standing in the early morning light. Behind them, mounted on a black horse, sat Overseer Torin himself, a thin, cruel man with eyes like chips of flint. The girl, Torin said flatly. I know she's here. Marin didn't move. What girl? Don't play games, healer. Elara Vance. She failed to deliver supplies to the southern outpost. She abandoned her duty. His gaze sharpened. And I have reason to believe she stole from the castle stores. That's a lie! Elara's voice rang out before she could stop herself. She pushed past Marin, stepping into the doorway. I didn't steal anything. Torin's smile was thin and poisonous. No? Then where are the supplies you were entrusted with? Elara's mind raced. I lost them. In the storm. Lost them, Torin repeated, his voice dripping with mockery. How convenient. And what, pray tell, were you doing out here instead of completing your assignment? Elara's jaw tightened. She could feel Marin's warning gaze on her, could feel the weight of the moment pressing down. She could lie. She could make something up, spin some story that might save her skin. But she was so tired of lying. I saved a life, she said clearly. I found an injured animal, and I brought it here for treatment. One of the guards snorted. She risked supplies for a dog? It's not, Elara started, but Torin cut her off. Enough. He dismounted smoothly, his boots crunching in the snow. Elara Vance, you are stripped of your position. You are hereby banished from castle grounds. If you return, you will be imprisoned for theft and dereliction of duty. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss only she could hear. You're nothing. You've always been nothing, and now everyone will know it. Elara's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at her to lash out, to fight back. But she forced herself to stand tall. I don't regret it, she said quietly. Torin's eyes narrowed. What? I said I don't regret it. Louder now, stronger. I'd do it again. For a moment, something flickered in Torin's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or anger. Then it hardened into cold contempt. Then you're a bigger fool than I thought. Guards, escort her off the property. If she resists, bind her. The guards moved forward. Marin stepped between them and Elara. She stays here, the old woman said firmly. She's done nothing wrong. She's a criminal. She's a girl who saved a dying creature. If that's a crime in your eyes, Overseer, then your eyes are blind. Torin's face darkened. You'd harbor a thief? I'd harbor a soul worth saving, which is more than I can say for you. The standoff held for a long, tense moment. Then Torin smiled, a thin, dangerous expression. Keep her then. But know this, healer. When the castle has need of your services, you may find our gratitude lacking. He turned and mounted his horse, the guards falling in behind him. Enjoy your little rescue, Elara Vance, he called over his shoulder. I hope it was worth losing everything. They rode away, swallowed by the snow-covered landscape. Marin closed the door and turned to Elara. The girl was shaking, not from cold, but from the enormity of what had just happened. Her job, her home, her entire life stripped away in minutes. I'm sorry, Elara whispered. I've brought you trouble. Marin snorted. Child, I've been bringing myself trouble for 40 years. One more headache won't kill me. She moved to the fire, adding wood. Besides, you did the right thing. The right thing got me cast out. The right thing usually does. Marin glanced at the wolf, still unconscious on the workbench. But sometimes, the right thing saves more than you know. Elara looked at the massive creature, its chest rising and falling steadily. I hope you're worth it, she thought. I hope I didn't just destroy my life for nothing. As if hearing her thoughts, the wolf's ear twitched. And deep in its unconscious mind, something shifted, something remembered, something that knew exactly who Elara Vance was, and what debt was now owed.
The
days that followed blurred into a strange, quiet rhythm. Elara slept on a pallet by the fire. She helped Maureen with her work, grinding herbs, preparing poultices, tending to the handful of villagers who braved the snow to seek treatment for ailments both mundane and serious. She tried not to think about the castle, about the life she'd lost. Mostly, she failed. But every time despair threatened to swallow her, she would look at the wolf. He was healing. Slowly, miraculously, the creature was recovering. The burns faded from angry black to mottled pink. The gashes closed, leaving raised scars across his dark fur. The broken leg mended, though he would likely limp for the rest of his life. And through it all, Elara stayed by his side. She changed his bandages. She dripped water between his teeth when fever made him too weak to drink. She spoke to him in low, steady tones, telling him stories, sharing her fears, confessing things she'd never told another living soul. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted one night, her hand resting on his flank. I don't know where I'll go, what I'll do. All I know is that when I saw you dying in that snow, I couldn't walk away. Everyone else would have, but I couldn't. The wolf's breathing was steady, deep. His eyes remained closed. Maybe that makes me a fool, Elara whispered. Maybe Torin was right. Maybe I'm just broken. Too soft for this world. Silence. Then so quietly she almost missed it. A sound. A low rumble. Not a growl. Something else. Elara froze. The wolf's eyes opened. Those amber eyes, bright and aware, fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. And in them, she saw something impossible. Recognition, understanding, gratitude. You're awake, she breathed. The wolf's gaze held hers for a long moment. Then, with visible effort, he shifted his massive head and rested it against her lap. Elara's hand moved instinctively, fingers sinking into his thick fur. You're going to be okay, she said softly. I promise. The wolf's eyes closed again. But this time, Elara could have sworn she saw the corner of his mouth lift, almost like a smile. On the seventh day, Marin woke Elara before dawn. Something's wrong, the old woman said, her voice tight. Elara bolted upright, immediately looking to the workbench. The wolf was gone. Where? Shh. Marin gestured toward the back room. In there. But Elara, you need to see this. Heart pounding, Elara crossed to the door and pushed it open. The back room was small, barely more than a storage space. Moonlight filtered through a single window, casting silver light across the floor. And there, collapsed against the far wall, was a man. A naked, scarred, unconscious man. Elara's mind went blank. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, broad-shouldered and corded with muscle. His body was covered in scars, some old and faded, others fresh and angry. His dark hair was matted with sweat. And across his ribs and thigh, she saw the unmistakable marks of the injuries she'd treated, the same injuries the wolf had borne. That's impossible, Elara whispered. Clearly not, Marin said dryly. She moved past Elara, kneeling beside the man with practiced calm. His fevers spiking. The transformation must have taken everything he had left. Transformation? Elara's voice rose. Marin, what? He's a shifter girl. Surely you've heard the stories. Stories aren't real. And yet, Marin gestured to the unconscious man. Here we are. Elara's legs felt unsteady. She sank to her knees, staring at him. His face was harsh, carved by violence and hardship. A scar ran from his temple to his jaw. His hands, even in unconsciousness, were curled into fists. He looked like a soldier, a warrior. Who is he? She whispered. I don't know. But whoever he is, he's dangerous. Marin met her eyes. And you saved his life. Elara couldn't look away from him. This man, this stranger, she'd risked everything for him. She'd lost her home, her safety, her future, All for someone she didn't even know, and she still didn't regret it. "Help me move him," Marin said. "We need to get him back to the main room. Keep him warm." Together, they maneuvered him onto a pallet near the fire. Marin covered him with blankets, checked his pulse and temperature, then sat back with a heavy sigh. Now we wait again. For what? For him to wake up. Marin's gaze was steady. And for you to decide what you're going to do when he does. Elara looked down at the man, at the steady rise and fall of his chest, at the scars that told stories of battles survived, at the hard lines of his face softened slightly by unconsciousness. "I don't even know his name," she said quietly. "Then maybe," Marin replied, "you should ask him." 3 days later, the stranger woke. Elara was alone when it happened, Marin having gone to the village to replenish supplies. She sat by the fire, mending one of her worn tunics, when she heard movement behind her. She turned. The man was sitting up, his gaze locked on her with startling intensity. Those amber eyes, the same eyes that had watched her in the snow, tracked her every movement. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, his voice, rough from disuse but deep and commanding, broke the silence. "You." It wasn't a question. Elara set down her mending carefully, her heart hammering. "Me," she agreed. He looked around the cabin, taking in his surroundings with the practiced assessment of someone used to evaluating threats. Then his gaze returned to her. "You pulled me from the storm." "Yes." "Why?" The question was flat, almost accusatory. Elara lifted her chin. "Because you were dying." "Oh, most people would have left me." "I'm not most people." Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or grudging respect. "No," he said quietly. "You're not." He tried to stand. His leg buckled immediately. Elara moved without thinking, crossing the room and catching his arm before he could fall. He was impossibly heavy, solid muscle, and barely controlled strength, but she braced herself and kept him upright. "Easy," she said. "Your leg's still healing." "You shouldn't. I've survived worse." "I don't doubt it. But you'll undo all the work Marin and I put into keeping you alive if you tear those stitches." He looked down at her, really looked at her, and Elara felt the full weight of his attention like a physical force. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elara Vance." "Elara." He repeated it slowly, as if committing it to memory. Then, with visible effort, he straightened. "I owe you a debt." "You don't owe me anything." "I owe you my life." "Then we're even. Because saving you cost me mine." His eyes sharpened. "Explain." So she did. She told him about the blizzard, about finding him dying in the snow, about abandoning her duty to save him, about Torin's arrival, the accusations, the banishment. He listened in silence, his expression growing darker with every word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then, "You lost everything for a stranger." "I couldn't leave you to die." "Why not?" Elara met his gaze steadily. "Because everyone else would have. And I'm tired of living in a world where that's acceptable." For the first time, she saw something crack in his hardened exterior, a flash of something raw and unguarded. "You're either very brave," he said quietly, "or very foolish." "Probably both." The corner of his mouth lifted, almost a smile. Then he swayed, and Elara realized he was still recovering, still weak despite his efforts to hide it. "Sit down before you fall down," she ordered, guiding him back to the pallet. He complied, but his hand caught her wrist gently. "What will you do now?" he asked. "You can't stay here forever." "I don't know." The admission hurt. "I don't have anywhere else to go." His grip tightened fractionally. "Then stay," he said, "until I'm strong enough to travel. After that." His amber eyes held hers. "I'll make sure you're taken care of. It's the least I can do." Elara's breath caught. "You don't have to—" "Yes," he said firmly. "I do." Before she could respond, the door burst open. Marin stood there, her face pale, a basket of supplies forgotten on the ground. "Elara," she said urgently, "you need to leave, now." "What? Why?" "Guards, a full battalion, headed this way. Someone reported seeing smoke from the cabin. Marin's gaze flickered to the man. They're looking for you, both of you. The stranger was on his feet in an instant, pain forgotten. How long? He demanded. Minutes, maybe less. He turned to Elara, and in his eyes she saw a decision being made. Can you ride? What? Can you ride? Yes, but then we're leaving, now. I can't just... Elara. His hand cupped her face, forcing her to meet his gaze. They're not coming to arrest you. Torin doesn't send a battalion for a banished servant. He's coming to silence you. Do you understand? The weight of it crashed over her. He wants me dead. Yes. Marin crossed the room, shoving a pack into Elara's hands. Food, medicine, blankets, go north. There are caves in the high mountains, old wolf dens. They won't find you there. Marin, go, child. The old woman's eyes were fierce. You saved his life. Now let him save yours. The sound of hoofbeats reached them, close, getting closer. The stranger moved to the back window, prying it open with a strength that shouldn't have been possible for someone barely healed. Come on, he said, extending his hand to Elara. She looked at Marin. The old woman smiled. I'll be fine. I'm too valuable to kill. But you need to run. Elara's throat tightened. She crossed the room and hugged Marin fiercely. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Thank me by surviving, Marin said. Now go. The stranger pulled Elara through the window, just as the front door crashed open. They ran. Behind them, Elara heard shouting, heard Torin's voice demanding answers. But she didn't look back. She ran beside the stranger, this man she'd saved, who was now saving her through snow and darkness toward an unknown future. And as they disappeared into the wilderness, Elara Vance realized something. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running from something. She was running toward it. Whatever came next, together. They ran until Elara's lungs burned and her legs threatened to give out beneath her. The stranger moved with impossible endurance despite his injuries, his hand locked around her wrist, pulling her forward through drifts that reached her thighs. Behind them, the shouts of guards faded into the howling wind, but he didn't slow. Not for miles. Not until they reached a granite outcropping that jutted from the mountainside like a broken tooth. In here, he said, his voice rough but steady, a cave entrance, barely visible beneath ice and shadow. He ducked inside, drawing Elara after him into darkness that smelled of stone and old snow. The moment they were concealed, his strength faltered. He staggered against the cave wall, one hand pressed to his ribs, where the worst of the poison burns had been. You're bleeding again, Elara said immediately, dropping the pack Marin had given her. You tore the stitches. It doesn't matter. It does if you bleed out in a cave. We can't stop yet. They'll track us. Let them track. Elara's voice was sharp. If you die, none of this means anything. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression shifted, softened, almost imperceptibly. You're stubborn. You're bleeding. A harsh breath that might have been a laugh escaped him. Then he lowered himself to the cave floor, leaning back against the stone with a grimace. Elara knelt beside him, her hands already moving to examine the wound. The stitches along his ribs had indeed torn, fresh blood seeping through the makeshift bandages Marin had applied days ago. This is going to hurt, she warned. Everything hurts. She worked quickly, efficiently, using supplies from Marin's pack, clean cloth, a vial of something that smelled like pine and alcohol, a curved needle already threaded. Her hands were steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her. You know what you're doing, he observed, his voice tight with pain. Marin taught me. I helped her with wounded soldiers sometimes. Elara pressed cloth against the wound to staunch the bleeding. The ones the castle physicians wouldn't waste time on. The expendable ones. Yes. He was quiet for a moment, watching her work with those unsettling amber eyes. What's your name? Elara asked, threading the needle through torn skin. He didn't flinch. You know mine. It seems only fair. Silence stretched between them. Then, Kael. Just Kael? For now. Elara glanced up at him. His face was shadowed in the dim light filtering from the cave entrance, all hard angles and carefully controlled pain. A man who'd learned to hide suffering so well, it had become reflex. Why won't you tell me your full name? Because, he said quietly, The moment you know who I am, everything changes. Something in his tone made her pause. Are you a criminal? No. A deserter? No. Then what are you that's so terrible I can't know? His gaze held hers, and in it she saw layers of things unsaid, decisions being weighed. Someone who's brought nothing but death everywhere he's gone, he finally said. Someone who doesn't deserve what you've done for him. Elara's hand stilled. She looked at this man, this stranger she dragged from the snow, nursed back from death, lost everything to save, and saw the truth written in every scar, every line of exhaustion, every shadow behind his eyes. He'd been fighting for a very long time, and he was so tired. I don't believe that, she said softly, returning to her work. If you were as terrible as you think, you would have left me behind to save yourself. But you didn't. I owe you. This isn't about debt. She tied off the last stitch, sat back on her heels. This is about the fact that when those guards came, your first thought was getting me to safety. That tells me more than any name could. Cale stared at her, something unreadable flickering across his features. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. You have no idea how rare people like you are. Before Elara could respond, a sound echoed from outside the cave, distant but growing closer, barking, tracking dogs. Kael was on his feet instantly, pain forgotten, every muscle in his body coiled for violence. How far are we from the northern peaks? He asked. 2 days on foot, maybe less if we don't stop. We won't make it, not with dogs on our trail. His jaw tightened. I need to shift. What? No, you're too weak. The transformation will... Elara. He caught her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. In human form, I'm injured and slow. As a wolf, I can lose the dogs, cover our tracks, buy us time. It's the only way. You could die. I could, but if I don't try, we definitely will. His grip tightened fractionally. Trust me. And despite every logical reason not to, Elara found herself nodding. What do I do? Run north. Stay in the rocks where the dogs can't track scent. There's a frozen waterfall 3 miles from here. You'll hear it before you see it. Behind it, there's a passage that leads to the old wolf dens Marin mentioned. Wait for me there. And if you don't come? Something fierce and utterly certain flashed in his eyes. I'll come. The barking was closer now, minutes away, maybe less. Cale stepped back, and Elara watched in horrified fascination as his body began to change. It wasn't graceful. It was brutal, visceral, bones cracking and reforming, muscle tearing and rebuilding, his human form collapsing inward as the wolf surged forth. He didn't cry out, but she saw the agony written in every convulsion, every shudder. And then the massive black wolf stood before her, amber eyes gleaming in the shadows. He was larger than she remembered, more terrifying. Every inch a predator built for hunting and killing, but when he looked at her, she saw only Kael. Go, she whispered. I'll be waiting. The wolf's gaze held hers for one more heartbeat. Then he turned and vanished into the storm. Elara grabbed the pack and ran. The next 3 hours were a nightmare of ice and exhaustion. She climbed over rocks that tore at her hands, slipped on frozen slopes that nearly sent her plummeting into ravines, pushed through snow so deep she could barely breathe. The temperature dropped as she climbed higher, until every breath felt like inhaling knives. Behind her, the barking grew fainter, then stopped altogether. Either Kael had succeeded, or the dogs had found something else to chase. She didn't let herself think about which. The waterfall appeared exactly as Kael had described, a frozen cascade of ice that glittered in the pale light, beautiful and deadly. The roar of water still flowing beneath the ice was deafening. Elara circled it carefully, searching for the passage Kael had mentioned. Her numb fingers traced stone until she found it, a gap barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, hidden behind the ice. She pushed inside. The passage was narrow, claustrophobic, but it opened after 20 feet into a larger cavern. Old bones littered the floor, deer, rabbits, things long dead. This had been a den once, a place of safety in a wilderness that offered none. Elara collapsed against the wall, shaking from cold and exhaustion and fear. Please, she whispered to the darkness. Please let him be alive. Time became meaningless. Minutes or hours could have passed. She tried to stay awake, tried to listen for sounds of pursuit, but exhaustion dragged at her like chains. Her eyes were closing when she heard movement at the passage entrance. Elara's hand went to the small knife Marin had packed. Useless against a trained soldier, but better than nothing. A shape emerged from the darkness. The wolf. Blood matted his fur. He limped heavily, favoring the leg that had been broken, but he was alive. Relief flooded through Elara so powerfully it left her dizzy. "Kael," she breathed. The wolf padded toward her, then collapsed at her side, his massive body trembling with exhaustion. She could feel the heat radiating from him. Too much heat. Fever, from pushing himself too far, too soon. "You idiot," Elara said, even as her hands moved to examine him. "You brave, stupid idiot." The wolf's eyes closed, and for the second time Elara found herself fighting to keep him alive. She worked through the night, using every trick Marin had taught her. She cleaned the wounds that had reopened during the chase. She forced water between the wolf's teeth when fever made him delirious. She wrapped him in blankets from the pack and built a small fire near the cave entrance, praying the smoke would dissipate before anyone saw it. And she talked to him. "You have to fight," she said, her hand resting on his flank, feeling the too rapid beat of his heart. "I didn't drag you through a blizzard just to lose you in a cave. Do you hear me? You promised you'd come back, so you don't get to die now." The wolf's breathing grew more labored. "Please," Elara whispered, her voice breaking. "Please don't leave me alone here." She didn't know when she fell asleep, exhaustion finally claiming her despite every attempt to stay vigilant. She woke to warmth. Not the warmth of the dying fire, but body heat, human body heat. Elara's eyes snapped open. Kael was curled around her, his arm draped across her waist, his breath warm against her hair. He'd shifted back sometime during the night, and now they lay tangled together beneath the blankets, his bare skin pressed against her clothed body. She should move, should pull away, put distance between them. She didn't. Instead, she let herself exist in this moment, safe, warm, not alone. It had been so long since she'd felt any of those things. So long since anyone had made her feel like she mattered. "Your heart's racing," Kael murmured against her hair, his voice rough with sleep. Elara went still. "You're awake. Have been for a while. Why didn't you say something? You looked peaceful, didn't want to ruin it." She felt him shift slightly behind her. "Also, you're warm. I'm not an idiot." Despite everything, Elara laughed, a short, startled sound that echoed in the cave. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I got torn apart and barely stitched back together. That's not far from the truth." "I know." His arm tightened fractionally around her waist. "Thank you. Again. For the 100th time." "Stop thanking me." "Stop saving my life and I will." Elara turned in his arms to face him and immediately regretted it. This close, she could see every detail of his face, the sharp line of his jaw, the scar that cut through his eyebrow, the gold flecks in his amber eyes. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things are beautiful, captivating and terrifying in equal measure. "The dogs," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "What happened?" "I led them into the eastern ravines, steep drops, narrow paths. Lost 2 of them to falls, scared off the rest." His expression darkened. "The guards gave up after that. They weren't willing to die chasing a wolf through the mountains. But they'll come back." "Eventually. Which means we can't stay here long." He studied her face, and something shifted in his gaze. "Elara, there's something I need to tell you, something you deserve to know before we go any further." Her heart kicked against her ribs. "What?" Kael was quiet for a long moment, and she watched him wrestle with whatever he was about to say. Then, "I'm not just a shifter, I'm—" A voice echoed from the passage entrance, cutting him off. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Both of them moved simultaneously, Kael surging upright, Elara scrambling backward, her hand finding the knife. A figure stood silhouetted against the cave entrance. Male, tall, armed with a crossbow aimed directly at Kael's chest. "You know," the stranger continued, his voice carrying a dangerous amusement, "when Torin said he'd lost track of the girl who stole from the castle, I didn't expect to find her shacked up with the Alpha King in a cave. This is going to be an interesting report." Elara's mind went blank. Alpha King. No. She looked at Kyle, at the tension in his shoulders, the resignation in his eyes, the way he didn't deny it. You're... She couldn't finish the sentence. Yes, Kyle said quietly, not looking at her. I am. The stranger laughed. Oh, this is delicious. She didn't know, did she? You didn't tell her. Who are you? Kale's voice was cold, controlled, utterly lethal. Captain Marcus Thorne, Royal Intelligence Division. And you, Your Majesty, have been missing for 3 weeks. The kingdom's been in chaos. Your brother's been running things in your absence, and let me tell you, he smiled, sharp and cruel. He's not particularly motivated to see you return. Kale's expression didn't change, but Elara saw his hands curl into fist. My brother sent you to find me? No, I came on my own. Well, mostly. Thorne's gaze slid to Elara. The girl's banishment caught my attention. Girl saves a wolf in a blizzard, loses everything for it, then disappears the same night a battalion gets sent to a healer's cabin. That's not coincidence. That's a cover-up. Clever, Kyle said flatly. I have my moments. Thorne adjusted his aim slightly. Here's what's going to happen. We're all going to take a nice trip back to the castle. His Majesty will resume his throne. I'll get a promotion. And you... He looked at Elara. You'll probably get executed for kidnapping royalty. Nothing personal. She didn't kidnap me, Kyle said, his voice dropping to a growl. She saved my life. Semantics. The law doesn't care about intent, only perception. And the perception is going to be that a lowly servant manipulated an injured king for personal gain. Elara's grip tightened on the knife. Her mind raced. One man, one crossbow, limited ammunition. If she could distract him, if Kyle could shift... Don't, Kale said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. A crossbow bolt will kill me before I finish transforming. And he'll put one in you the second you move. Smart man, Thorne said. Now, weapons down, both of you. Kale didn't move. If I go back now, I'm dead. You know that. Probably, but that's not my problem. Thorne's finger moved to the trigger. Weapons down. Last warning. The cave went silent except for the distant roar of the waterfall. Then Elara spoke. What if I can give you something better? Both men looked at her. Elara, don't... Kyle started. Information, she continued, ignoring him. About Overseer Torrin, about what's really happening in the castle. Thorne's eyes narrowed. I'm listening. Torrin's been embezzling from the treasury, skimming supplies, falsifying records, selling military rations on the black market. I saw the ledgers. I didn't understand what they meant at the time, but I remember. It was a lie, a complete fabrication, but Elara said it with such conviction, such absolute certainty, that for a moment even she almost believed it. Thorne studied her. Proof? In the overseer's office. Hidden compartment beneath the 3rd floorboard from the window. That's where he keeps the real books. And you're telling me this because, Elara said, her voice steady, if you kill us, you get a promotion. But if you bring back evidence of treason, you get a lot more than that. Kale's hand found hers beneath the blanket, squeezed once. A warning or a plea, she wasn't sure. Thorne was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, genuine surprise in the sound. You're lying through your teeth, but it's a good lie, bold. Almost makes me want to check. He lowered the crossbow slightly. Here's my counteroffer. You two stay here. I go back to the castle. Verify your story. If it's true, I come back and we negotiate. If it's not... His smile turned cold. Well, you've got maybe a week before I return with enough men to drag you both back in chains. That's not... Kale started. That's the deal, Thorne interrupted. Take it, or I shoot you both right now and tell your brother you died in a cave-in. Silence stretched like a drawn blade. Finally, Kyle nodded once. 1 week. 1 week, Thorne agreed. He backed toward the passage, crossbows still trained on them. Don't try to run. I've got scouts watching every pass out of these mountains. You won't make it 3 miles. Then he was gone, swallowed by shadows. The moment his footsteps faded, Kyle turned to Elara. What were you thinking? His voice was low, dangerous. You just put a target on your back. The target was already there, Elara shot back. Or did you miss the part where he said I'd be executed? You lied to a royal intelligence officer. I bought us time. Time for what? Kael's hands gripped her shoulders. Elara, there is no evidence. There is no hidden compartment. When he comes back then we make sure there is. Kael went still. What? Elara pulled away from him, started pacing the small cave, her mind racing. Torin wanted me dead. Not arrested. Dead. Why? Because I saw something I shouldn't have. Maybe not ledgers, but something. She turned to face Kael. And you, the Alpha King, missing for 3 weeks, nearly killed by poison. Military-grade poison. That's not random violence. That's assassination. Understanding dawned in Kael's eyes. You think Torin's involved. I think someone in the castle wants you dead. And I think Torin's either part of it or knows who is. She moved closer to him. You asked me to trust you when the guards were coming. Now I'm asking you to trust me. Trust you to do what exactly? To go back. Absolutely not. Listen to me. Elara grabbed his hands, held them tight. I was a servant in that castle for 8 years. I'm invisible to people like Torin. He doesn't see me as a threat. But you, everyone knows your face. You can't walk into the castle without starting a war. And you can? Yes, because I'm nobody. I'm just a banished servant who got lucky enough to escape. If I show up beaten, desperate, begging for mercy, she saw the realization hit him. Torin will gloat. He'll parade me around as proof of what happens when you defy the system. And while he's doing that, I'll find proof, real proof. Kael's expression was agonized. They'll kill you. Maybe. But if I don't try, we're both dead anyway. She squeezed his hands. You said I was rare. You said people like me are hard to find. Well, this is who I am. Someone who doesn't walk away when things get hard. Elara, I'm going, she said firmly. The only question is whether you're going to help me or try to stop me. For a long moment, Kael just stared at her. Then slowly he pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength. You're going to get yourself killed, he said against her hair. Probably. And I'm going to hate every second of it. I know. What? He pulled back just enough to look at her face, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. Then we do this smart, carefully. And the moment it goes wrong, you run. No heroics, no last stands. You run and you don't look back. Understand? Elara nodded. Kael's thumb traced her cheekbone, a touch so gentle it seemed impossible coming from someone so dangerous. When this is over, he said quietly, I'm going to tell you everything. Who I am, what I've done, why I was out there dying in the snow, and you'll probably hate me for it. I won't. You don't know that. Yes, Elara said, her hand covering his. I do. Something broke in his expression, some carefully maintained wall crumbling. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm on her lips. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, he whispered, or the most reckless. Why not both? And despite everything, despite the danger, the lies, the impossible odds, Kael laughed. It was a broken sound, rough and unpracticed, like he'd forgotten how. But it was real. And in that moment, in a cave hidden behind a frozen waterfall with death waiting on all sides, Elara understood something fundamental. She wasn't just saving his life anymore. She was saving herself. Because for the first time since her parents died, she had something worth fighting for. Someone who saw her. Really saw her. Not as a servant. Not as invisible. But as exactly who she was. And that was worth any risk. We should rest, Kael said finally, pulling back. You've got a long walk ahead of you tomorrow. We both do. No, I'm staying here. If Thorn's scouts are watching, they're looking for both of us. But one person, traveling alone, desperate, he met her eyes. You'll be safer without me. I don't want to be safer. I want... Elara, his hand cupped her face. Please, let me protect you the only way I can right now. She wanted to argue, wanted to refuse. But she saw the truth in his eyes. This was killing him, letting her walk into danger while he hid in a cave. It went against every instinct he had, which meant it was probably the right strategy. 1 week, she said. If I'm not back in 1 week, I'll burn the castle down to find you. It should have sounded like hyperbole. It didn't. They spent the rest of the night planning. Routes, cover stories, contingencies. Kyle shared everything he knew about the castle's layout, about Torrin's habits, about which guards could be bribed and which couldn't. And when dawn broke, painting the cave entrance in shades of gold and pink, Elara shouldered the pack and turned to face him. Kyle stood in the shadows, still shirtless, still scarred, still impossibly dangerous even in his weakened state. "Come back to me," he said. It wasn't a request. "I will." Elara walked out of the cave without looking back because if she did, she knew she'd lose her nerve. The journey down the mountain took most of the day. She moved carefully, keeping to the rocks and shadows, avoiding open ground where Thorn's scouts might spot her. By the time the castle came into view, a massive fortress of gray stone perched on a cliff overlooking the valley, dusk was falling. Elara circled wide, approaching from the southern road where merchants and travelers entered. She'd torn her clothes strategically, rubbed dirt into her face and hair, adopted the hunched posture of someone beaten down by the world. The guard at the gate barely looked at her. "State your business." "I need to speak with Overseer Torrin," Elara said, her voice small, defeated. I'm turning myself in." The guard's eyebrows rose, then he smiled, a cruel, knowing expression. "Wait here." 20 minutes later, Elara stood in Torrin's office, hands bound, facing the man who'd destroyed her life. He looked exactly as she remembered, thin, sharp-featured, eyes like chips of ice. He sat behind an ornate desk, fingers steepled, studying her with the expression of a cat watching a mouse. "Well, well," Torrin said softly. "The prodigal servant returns." Elara kept her gaze down, her shoulders hunched. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I couldn't survive out there. I'm begging you. Please, let me come back." "Come back?" Torrin laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You stole from the castle. You abandoned your post. You consorted with dangerous animals." He stood, circled the desk, moving closer. "Why would I ever let you back?" "Because I'll do anything," Elara whispered. "Anything you want. I'll work twice as hard. I'll never question orders again. Just please don't send me back out there." Torrin studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "You know what? I believe you." He returned to his desk, made a note in a ledger. "You'll be assigned to the lower kitchens. Double shifts. No days off. One mistake, and you're in the dungeons. Understood?" Relief, fake but convincing, flooded Elara's face. "Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much." "Get out of my sight." Elara bowed and fled the office, her heart pounding. Phase 1 complete. She was inside. Now came the hard part, finding proof before Thorn came back, before Torrin realized she wasn't broken, before everything fell apart. But as she descended into the castle's lower levels, into the heat and chaos of the kitchens where servants moved like ghosts, Elara allowed herself one small, fierce smile. They thought she was defeated. They had no idea what was coming. The lower kitchens were hell in stone and fire. Heat rolled off massive ovens in waves that turned the air liquid. Servants moved in organized chaos, chopping, stirring, hauling cauldrons of boiling water that could strip flesh from bone. The head cook, a mountain of a woman named Greta, assigned Elara to the scullery with a disgusted look and a warning that lasted 3 words. "Don't slow down." Elara didn't. She scrubbed pots until her hands cracked and bled. She hauled water from the well until her shoulders screamed. She worked 18-hour shifts without complaint. Head down, invisible among the dozens of other servants who populated the castle's lowest levels. And every spare second, she listened. Servants talked. They gossiped, complained, shared information they thought no one important would ever hear. Within 3 days, Elara knew which guards drank too much, which nobles were having affairs, which ministers were falling out of favor with the crown. But she learned nothing about Torrin. The overseer kept his secrets close. He rarely visited the lower levels, conducted his business behind closed doors, trusted almost no one. The other servants spoke of him with a mixture of fear and resentment, but no one knew anything concrete. On the 4th night, exhausted and frustrated, Elara collapsed onto her pallet in the servants' quarters and allowed herself one moment of despair. 3 days left before Thorne returned. 3 days to find evidence that might not even exist. She was failing. You look like you're plotting murder. Elara's eyes snapped open. A girl sat on the next pallet, young, maybe 16, with auburn hair pulled into a messy braid and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. Just tired, Elara said carefully. Liar. The girl grinned. You're the one who came back, right? The one Torin banished? Every instinct screamed at Elara to deflect, to deny. But something in the girl's expression, a kind of reckless curiosity, made her pause. Yes. Bold. The girl extended her hand. I'm Sarah. I clean the upper floors, which means I see things people think servants don't notice. Elara shook her hand warily. Like what? Like the fact that you're not actually broken. You're pretending. Sarah leaned closer, her voice dropping. Question is, why? Elara's mind raced. Trust was dangerous, but so was working alone. If I told you, she said slowly, it could get you killed. Most interesting things do. Sarah's grin widened. Tell me anyway. So Elara did. Not everything, not about Kyle, not about what he was, but enough. About Torin's corruption, about needing proof, about having less than 3 days to find it. Sarah listened in silence. Then she laughed, a bright, reckless sound that somehow fit perfectly in this dim, miserable space. You're insane. I love it. She stood, brushing dust from her skirts. Torin's office is on the 3rd floor, East Wing. He leaves every night at midnight to inspect the guard rotations. You'll have maybe 20 minutes before he comes back. How do you know that? Because I've been stealing his wine for 6 months, and he hasn't noticed yet. Sarah winked. Meet me at the servants' stairs tomorrow night, 1 hour before midnight. I'll get you in. Why would you help me? Sarah's expression turned serious. Because Torin had my brother flogged for stealing bread to feed his family. 30 lashes. My brother was 12. Her voice went cold. If you're going to take that bastard down, I want to help. The next night, Elara met Sarah at the appointed time. The girl appeared from the shadows carrying 2 sets of cleaning supplies and a ring of keys that jangled softly. Stolen from the head housekeeper, Sarah explained. She's drunk by 10 every night. Won't notice they're gone until morning. They moved through the castle like ghosts, keeping to servant passages that honeycombed the walls. Elara had worked here for 8 years and never knew half these routes existed. Most people don't, Sarah said when Elara mentioned it. Servants' architecture, built so nobles never have to see the people who keep them alive. They emerged on the 3rd floor. The corridor was empty, lit by torches that cast dancing shadows. Sarah led Elara to a heavy oak door. This is it. You've got 20 minutes, maybe less if he finishes rounds early. Sarah pressed the keys into Elara's hand. I'll stand watch. If someone comes, I'll knock twice. Run. Sarah, go. Elara unlocked the door and slipped inside. Torin's office was exactly as she remembered. Ornate desk, leather chairs, walls lined with ledgers and official documents. She moved quickly, searching drawers, examining papers, looking for anything that might prove corruption. Nothing. 10 minutes passed. 15. Elara's hands shook with frustration. There had to be something. Torin was too careful, too paranoid to conduct illegal business without records. Hidden compartment beneath the 3rd floorboard from the window. Her own lie, spoken to Thorne days ago, echoed in her mind. What if it wasn't a lie? What if she'd guessed correctly without knowing it? Elara moved to the window, counted 3 boards, and knelt. The wood looked solid, undisturbed. She pressed, testing for give. Nothing. She tried the 4th board, the 5th. 2 knocks sounded at the door. Elara's heart stopped. She looked around wildly. No other exit, nowhere to hide. If Torin walked in now, it was over. The door handle turned. Elara dove behind the desk, pressing herself into the narrow space between it and the wall, barely breathing. The door opened, but it wasn't Torin who entered. It was a man Elara had never seen before. Tall, well-dressed, with dark hair and features that struck her as familiar in a way she couldn't place. He moved with the confidence of someone who belonged here, crossing to the desk and pulling a key from his pocket. Elara watched through a gap in the wood as the man opened the bottom desk drawer, the one she'd already searched, and pressed something inside. A hidden catch clicked. The back panel of the drawer slid away, revealing a second compartment. From it, the man withdrew a leather folio stuffed with papers. He spread them across the desk, scanning quickly, his expression growing darker with each page. Then he spoke, and his voice made Elara's blood run cold. "Still trying to undermine me from the shadows, brother?" Brother. The word hit Elara like a physical blow. This was Prince Darien, Kael's brother. The one Thorn had said was running the kingdom in Kael's absence. The one who wasn't particularly motivated to see Kael return. Darien gathered the papers, returned them to the hidden compartment, and left as quickly as he'd come. The moment the door closed, Elara moved. She crossed to the desk, found the hidden catch, a small lever disguised as decorative metalwork, and triggered it. The compartment opened. Inside were documents that made her stomach turn. Supply manifests showing weapons sold to enemy kingdoms. Records of bribes paid to border guards. Letters discussing the assassination of King Kael Draven, written in coded language but clear enough in intent. And at the bottom, a contract, signed by Overseer Torin and Prince Darien both. An agreement to eliminate the Alpha King and place Darien on the throne. In exchange, Torin would be elevated to Minister of the Treasury, with full control over the kingdom's finances. Elara's hands trembled as she read. They'd poisoned Kael, left him to die in the wilderness, and when that failed, they'd tried to cover their tracks by eliminating anyone who might have seen him, including a lowly servant who'd had the misfortune of saving his life. Sarah's knock came again, 3 times, urgent. Elara grabbed the contract and 2 pages of supply records, stuffed them inside her shirt, and closed the compartment. She just reached the door when she heard voices in the corridor, Torin and Darien returning together. "Won't be a problem much longer," Torin was saying. "Thorn will handle it quietly." "He'd better, if my brother returns before the coronation." Elara didn't wait to hear more. She slipped out the door and ran. Sarah grabbed her arm, pulling her into a side passage, just as Torin and Darien rounded the corner. They pressed against the wall, hardly daring to breathe, as the 2 men entered the office. "Go," Sarah mouthed. "Now." They fled through the servants' passages, not stopping until they reached the kitchens. Only then did Elara allow herself to breathe. "Did you find it?" Sarah asked. Elara pulled the documents from her shirt. Sarah's eyes widened. "Spirits above, that's treason." Elara's voice was steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "And proof that the king, is in danger." "What are you going to do?" Good question. Elara had evidence now. But evidence meant nothing if she couldn't get it to someone who mattered, someone who could act on it. Thorn was coming back in 2 days, but Thorn worked for the crown, and right now the crown meant Darien. She couldn't trust him. She couldn't trust anyone in the castle. Except the Royal Council, Elara said suddenly. They meet every week to advise the crown. If I can get this to them publicly, where Darien can't suppress it. The next council meeting is tomorrow, Sarah interrupted. Noon, in the Great Hall. Her expression turned grim. But you'll never get close. Security's tripled since the king went missing. They're not letting anyone near who isn't nobility or high-ranking military. Elara's mind raced. Then an idea struck. Terrible, dangerous, absolutely insane. What if I wasn't trying to get close? She said slowly. What if I was trying to get caught? Sarah stared at her. You've lost your mind. Maybe, Elara gripped the documents tighter. But if I cause a scene, if I force them to acknowledge me in front of the entire council, they can't just make me disappear. Too many witnesses. They can throw you in a dungeon and lose the key. Not if I make sure everyone knows what I have first. It was a terrible plan. A dozen things could go wrong. Probably would go wrong. But it was the only plan she had. I need to get to the Great Hall tomorrow before the council convenes, Elara said. Can you help me? Sarah looked at her for a long moment. Then she sighed. My brother's flogging scars are still healing, so yes. She grabbed Elara's hand. But if we're doing this, we're doing it right. Come on. Sarah led her through the castle to a storage room filled with old uniforms and costumes from past festivals. She pulled out a servant's formal livery, the kind worn by those who served during important ceremonies. Put this on. If you're dressed right, you can walk right past the guards. They never look at servants' faces. Elara changed quickly. The uniform fit reasonably well, and when she caught her reflection in a polished shield, she barely recognized herself. "One more thing," Sarah said. She braided Elara's hair tightly, pinning it up in the formal style senior servants wore. "There, you look official." "Thank you," Elara said, "for all of this." Sarah shrugged. "Thank me when we're not dead." They spent the rest of the night preparing. Sarah drew maps of the Great Hall, marking exits and guard positions. They rehearsed what Elara would say, how she would move, what she would do if things went wrong. When dawn broke, Elara felt as ready as she ever would be, which was to say, not ready at all. She reported to the kitchens as usual, working through the morning while her mind churned. At 11:30, she slipped away, changed into the formal livery, and made her way toward the Great Hall. The corridors were crowded with nobles and officials arriving for the council meeting. Elara kept her head down, carrying a tray of wine glasses as camouflage. Guards waved her through checkpoints without a second glance. Just another servant, invisible. The Great Hall was massive. Vaulted ceilings, stone pillars, long tables arranged in a horseshoe shape. The Royal Council was already assembling. Military commanders, nobles, ministers, all the kingdom's power concentrated in one room. And at the head table, sitting in the king's chair, was Prince Darien. Elara's hands tightened on the tray. She moved along the wall, serving wine to officials, waiting for the right moment. The room filled. Conversations hummed. Darien called the meeting to order. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying easily through the hall, "we convene today to address several pressing matters. First among them, the continued absence of King Kyle. The king lives!" Elara's voice rang out, clear and strong, cutting through the assembled nobles like a blade. Every head turned. Darien's expression went carefully blank. "Excuse me?" Elara set down the tray and stepped forward, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone must hear it. "King Kael Draven lives," she repeated, "and there are people in this room who tried to kill him." Chaos erupted. Guards moved toward her immediately. Nobles shouted questions. Darien stood, his face darkening. "Seize her," he commanded. "This woman is delusional, a known criminal." "I have proof," Elara shouted over the noise. She pulled the documents from inside her jacket, held them high. A contract signed by Prince Darien and Overseer Torin detailing plans to assassinate the king and seize the throne. The room went silent, every eye fixed on the papers in her hand. "Those are forgeries," Darien said, his voice ice. "Fabrications created by a desperate woman trying to—" "Then let the council examine them," Elara interrupted. She looked directly at the assembled nobles. "Let them judge for themselves whether the prince's signature is real, unless he's afraid of what they'll find." It was a calculated gamble, challenging Darien publicly in front of the kingdom's most powerful people. He couldn't refuse without looking guilty. For a moment, she thought he might do it anyway. Then Lord Commander Garrett, head of the military, a grizzled veteran with more scars than smooth skin, spoke. "Let's see them." Darien's jaw tightened. "Commander, if they're forgeries, we'll know immediately." Garrett's gaze was steady. "And if they're not, we need to know that too." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Darien had no choice. "Fine," he said coldly. "Bring them here." Elara moved forward, guards flanking her on both sides. She placed the documents on the table in front of Garrett. The commander examined them in silence, his expression growing darker with each page. Other council members leaned in, reading over his shoulder. The silence stretched. Then Garrett looked up at Darien. "This is your signature," he said. Not a question, a statement. "It's a forgery. I've seen your hand on 1,000 documents, Your Highness. This is yours." Garrett's voice was steel. "As is Overseer Torin's." The room erupted again. Nobles shouted accusations. Ministers demanded explanations. The guards holding Elara looked uncertain, unsure whether they should still be restraining her. Darien's mask finally cracked. "So what if it is?" he snarled. "My brother was weak, sentimental. He was leading this kingdom to ruin. Someone had to act." The admission hung in the air like poison. Garrett stood slowly. "You confess to attempting regicide." "I confess to saving the kingdom from a fool who valued wolves and peasants over power." Darien's gaze swept the room. "And half of you agreed with me. Don't pretend otherwise." Some of the nobles looked away. Where is the king now? Garrett demanded, looking at Elara. Safe, Elara said. Hidden, until it's safe for him to return. Safe, Darian laughed harshly. He's dying in a cave somewhere, if he's not already dead. And this girl, he pointed at Elara with pure venom. This nobody's servant thinks she can waltz in here and overturn the natural order because she rescued a dying animal. I rescued your brother, Elara said quietly. Your king, and I'd do it again. Darian's hand moved to his belt, to the dagger there. Everything happened at once. Garrett shouted a warning. Guards moved forward. Darian drew the blade and lunged, not at Elara, but at Garrett, the one man in the room who could command the military to act against him. Steel flashed. Blood sprayed. Garrett went down, the dagger buried in his shoulder, and the great hall exploded into violence. Nobles scattered. Guards drew weapons, half moving to defend Darian, half moving to restrain him. Furniture crashed. Someone screamed. Elara dove behind a pillar as swords clashed around her. She had to move, had to run, but the exits were blocked by fighting men. Then a hand grabbed her arm. Sarah, somehow in the chaos, pulling her toward a servant's entrance hidden behind a tapestry. Come on! They ran through passages as shouts and sounds of fighting echoed behind them. Sarah led the way with practiced ease, twisting through corridors until they emerged in the castle's lower levels. What now? Sarah gasped. Elara's mind raced. The council was in chaos. Darian had shown his hand, but Garrett was wounded, possibly dying, and without him the military might fracture. She needed Kyle. I have to get to the mountains, Elara said. I have to bring him back. You'll never make it. The gates will be locked down. The postern gate, Elara interrupted. The one servants use for supply runs. It's small, only one guard. If we move now... A voice cut through the darkness. Going somewhere, Elara? Both girls froze. Torin emerged from the shadows, flanked by 4 guards. His expression was cold death. You've caused quite a bit of trouble, he said softly. Did you really think you could expose us and just walk away? The council knows everything now, Elara said, trying to keep her voice steady. Killing me won't change that. No, but it will feel satisfying. Torin gestured to the guards. Take them both, the dungeons, and make sure no one hears them scream. The guards moved forward. Elara backed up, Sarah beside her, until they hit the wall. No escape, no weapons. This was it. Then the temperature in the corridor plummeted. The torches flickered, went out. Darkness swallowed everything. A growl echoed through the black, deep, primal, utterly inhuman. What? Torin started. The growl became a roar, and then screaming. Elara couldn't see what was happening, but she heard it. Guards shouting in terror, steel clattering on stone, Torin's voice rising in panic. Something massive moved through the darkness. She caught glimpses of shadow and gleaming eyes, smelled blood and wild things. Then a hand found hers, human, warm, strong. Run, Kael's voice said in her ear. Now! Elara didn't hesitate. She grabbed Sarah's hand and ran, following Kael's lead through pitch-black corridors by touch and trust alone. Behind them, the screaming stopped. They emerged into torchlight. Kael was there, half-dressed, blood spattered across his chest. Some his, most not. His eyes blazed amber in the flickering light. You were supposed to wait, Elara said, breathless. You were supposed to stay safe. His gaze raked over her, checking for injuries. What happened? I exposed Darian, in front of the entire council. Kael went very still. You did what? He tried to kill Commander Garrett. The castle's in chaos. We need... A bell began to toll, deep, resonant, echoing through stone. The alarm. We need to move, Kael said. Now. Where? His jaw set. The throne room. If Darian's making his play, he'll try to seize the crown before anyone can stop him. You're in no condition to fight. I'm the only one who can. Kael gripped her shoulders. Elara, listen to me. Get to the stables. Take horses. Ride north and don't stop. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. His eyes were fierce. I'm ending this tonight. But I need to know you're safe. Please. Elara looked at him. At this man she'd saved, who'd saved her in return, who'd somehow become the center of her entire world in a handful of days. Come back to me, she said, echoing his own words. Kael's expression softened. He pulled her close, pressed his forehead to hers. "Always," he whispered. Then he was gone, disappearing into the chaos with lethal purpose. Sarah grabbed Elara's arm. "We need to go." "No." Elara pulled away. "I'm not running anymore." "Elara." "He's walking into a trap. Darian will have guards, assassins, everything ready." Elara's mind raced. "But if I can reach the council members, if I can rally them, you're one servant girl." "I'm the girl who saved the king's life." Elara's voice was steel. "And I'm going to make sure he keeps it." She ran toward the great hall, Sarah cursing and following. They reached it just as Kael kicked open the main doors. The hall was in ruins, bodies on the floor, blood on the walls. And at the center, on the throne that didn't belong to him, sat Darian, surrounded by 20 armed guards. Kael walked forward, alone, unarmed, impossibly calm. "Get off my throne, brother," Darian smiled. "Come make me." And Elara watched as the Alpha King went to war. Kael moved like death given form. The first guard didn't even have time to raise his sword before Kael's fist connected with his jaw, the crack of breaking bone echoing through the hall. The second lunged with a spear. Kael sidestepped, caught the shaft, and used the guard's own momentum to send him crashing into a stone pillar. 3 more rushed him at once. Elara watched from the doorway, her heart in her throat, as Kael dismantled them with brutal efficiency. No wasted movement, no hesitation, just raw, devastating violence born from years of war and survival. But 20 against 1 were impossible odds, even for him. "Sarah," Elara said quietly, her eyes never leaving the fight, "I need you to find any council members still alive. Tell them the king fights for his throne. Tell them to choose a side." "What are you going to do?" "Something stupid." Before Sarah could protest, Elara stepped into the great hall. "Stop!" Her voice rang out, clear and commanding. Every head turned. The fighting paused for a heartbeat. Darian's eyes found hers, and his expression twisted with contempt. "The servant girl, come to watch your king die?" "No." Elara walked forward, her hands raised, weaponless but unafraid. "I came to give you a choice." Kael's gaze snapped to her, fury and fear warring in his eyes. "Elara, get out of here! Surrender now!" Elara continued, ignoring him, speaking directly to Darian. "Abdicate! Face trial! You might live!" Darian laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You think I'm afraid of you? A nobody? A servant who got lucky?" "No, I think you're afraid of what I represent." Elara stopped 10 paces from the throne. "I'm the girl who saved the king when everyone else would have walked away. I'm proof that power doesn't make you strong, that titles don't make you worthy." She raised her voice so everyone in the hall could hear. "I'm proof that even the smallest person can change everything, and that terrifies you." Silence fell like a blade. Darian's smile faded. "Kill her." The guards moved. Kael roared, a sound that wasn't entirely human, and threw himself between Elara and the advancing soldiers. His body began to shift, bones cracking, muscles reforming. But he was too slow, too injured, the transformation incomplete. A sword sliced across his ribs. He went down hard. "No!" Elara screamed. She didn't think. She ran, throwing herself over Kael's fallen body, shielding him with her own. "Kill them both," Darian commanded. The guard raised his sword. "Hold!" The voice boomed through the hall like thunder. Every guard froze. Lord Commander Garrett stood in the doorway, his shoulder bandaged but his sword drawn, flanked by 30 soldiers wearing the royal crest. Blood stained his uniform, but his eyes were clear and furious. "Any man who raises a blade against the king answers to me," Garrett said, his voice deadly calm. The guards surrounding Darian hesitated, looking between the commander and the prince. Darian shot to his feet. "These soldiers are traitors. These soldiers are loyal to the crown," Garrett interrupted. "The rightful crown, which sits on the head of King Kael Draven, not you. My brother is unfit to rule. Your brother nearly died defending this kingdom from invasion while you sat in the castle plotting treason." Garrett's voice cut like a whip. "The only person unfit here is you." More soldiers poured into the hall, surrounding Darian's guards. The prince's forces were outnumbered 3-1 now. The mathematics of the situation were clear. Darien had lost. But cornered animals were the most dangerous. Fine, Darien said, his voice gone cold and flat. If I can't have the throne. His hand moved to his belt, pulling a small vial. Neither can he. Elara saw it in his eyes a split second before he moved. The same poison that had nearly killed Kael, concentrated, lethal. Darien hurled the vial at Kael. Elara lunged, her hand outstretched and caught it midair. The glass shattered in her palm. Liquid fire burned through her skin. The poison soaked into her bloodstream instantly, agony racing up her arm like lightning. She heard Kael scream her name, heard shouting, sounds of struggle, chaos erupting again. But it all seemed very far away. Her legs buckled. The world tilted. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Kael's face swam into view, his expression shattered. No, no, no! His hands pressed against her poisoned palm, trying futilely to stop what had already happened. Elara, stay with me. Had to, she whispered. Her tongue felt thick. You can't die. Kingdom needs you. I don't care about the kingdom. His voice broke. I need you. Do you understand? I need you. Elara tried to smile. Liar. You're the king. You don't need anyone. I need you. Kael pulled her against his chest, and she felt wetness on his face. Tears. The Alpha King was crying. Please, please don't leave me. The world was going dark at the edges, cold spreading through her veins like winter's deepest freeze. Marin, Elara managed. Get Marin. She knows how to... She's 3 hours away. Then you'd better hurry. Kael looked up wildly. Garrett! Horse, now! The fastest you have. My lord, you can't leave the castle. Darien is still... I don't care, Kael's voice was raw anguish. Find the healer. Bring her here. I don't care what it takes. Garrett's expression softened. He nodded once and barked orders. Soldiers scattered. Kael looked back down at Elara. His hand cupped her face with desperate gentleness. You're not allowed to die, he said fiercely. That's a royal command. Do you hear me? Elara's eyes were heavy, so heavy. Can't disobey? You're the king. That's right. So you stay alive, you fight, and when you wake up, his voice caught. When you wake up, I'm going to tell you everything. Who I was, who I am, who I want to be. And it's all because of you. Kael, I love you. The words came out broken, desperate. I don't care that I've known you less than 2 weeks. I don't care that you're a servant and I'm supposed to marry for alliances. I love you, and you don't get to leave me now that I finally found you. Elara wanted to respond, wanted to tell him that she loved him too, that he'd saved her just as much as she'd saved him. But the darkness was too strong. Her eyes closed, and Kael's scream followed her into the black. The world came back in fragments, pain first, burning through her veins like acid, then voices, arguing, urgent. Too much poison, even for someone twice her size. I don't care what's normal. My lord, you need to prepare yourself. No. Hands on her face, gentle, shaking. Come back, please. Come back to me. Elara fought toward consciousness, like swimming through tar, heavy, exhausting, every inch a battle. But she fought anyway, because Kael needed her to. Her eyes opened. Blurred shapes resolved slowly. A ceiling. Stone. The castle. Marin's face hovering above her, lined with exhaustion. There she is, the old healer breathed. Stubborn girl, knew you wouldn't quit. Elara tried to speak. Her throat was raw, tongue like sandpaper. Water, Marin said, lifting Elara's head, pressing a cup to her lips. Small sips. The water was heaven. Elara drank, coughed, drank more. How long? She managed. 3 days? Marin sat back, studying her with professional assessment. You were dead twice. We brought you back twice. That poison should have killed you in minutes. Why didn't it? Honestly, I think you were too angry to die. Marin's expression softened. That, and the king wouldn't let you. He's been here every moment, hasn't slept, barely eaten, just sat there holding your hand and ordering you to live. Elara looked around the room. She was in a chamber she didn't recognize, richly appointed, with tapestries on the walls and a fire crackling in the hearth. Not the servants' quarters. Where, the king's personal chambers. Marin smiled slightly. He had you moved here the moment we stabilized you. Said if anyone objected, they could take it up with his sword. Darian. In the dungeons, along with Torin and everyone involved in the conspiracy. Marin's expression turned grim. The trials start next week. They're likely to hang. Good. The door burst open. Kael stood there, wild-eyed, chest heaving like he'd been running. He saw Elara awake, and the expression that crossed his face was beyond description. Relief and joy and grief and love all tangled together. He crossed the room in 3 strides, dropped to his knees beside the bed, and buried his face against her shoulder. His body shook. "You're alive," he whispered. "You're actually alive." Elara's hand moved weakly to his hair. "Couldn't disobey. Royal command." Kael laughed. A broken, wet sound. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes red-rimmed, his face haggard. "Don't ever do that again," he said fiercely. "Don't ever throw yourself in front of poison for me again." "Can't promise that." "Elara, you're my king." She cupped his face with her unbandaged hand. "And you're mine. I'd take 1,000 vials of poison before I let you die." Kael's eyes closed. When they opened again, they blazed with something fierce and unbreakable. "Marin," he said, not looking away from Elara. "Leave us." The healer raised an eyebrow. "She's barely conscious." "Leave us." Marin sighed but stood, gathering her supplies. "Don't tire her out. She needs rest." The moment the door closed, Kael leaned forward and kissed Elara. It was gentle, reverent, a kiss that tasted of tears and relief and promises. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "I meant what I said," he whispered. "Before, when you were dying. I love you." "I love you too," Elara said. "Even though you're stubborn and reckless and apparently cry when you're scared." "Only for you." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Only ever for you." They stayed like that for a long moment, just breathing the same air, reassuring themselves the other was real. Finally, Kael pulled back. He sat on the edge of the bed, his hand never leaving hers. "There are things you need to know," he said, "about what happened while you were unconscious. Tell me." So he did. Darian's arrest had been swift but brutal. Half the conspirators had tried to fight their way out. They'd failed. Torin had attempted to bargain, offering information in exchange for clemency. Kael had personally denied the request. The Royal Council had convened an emergency session. With Garrett's testimony and the documents Elara had recovered, the evidence of treason was irrefutable. Darian would face trial, but the outcome was predetermined. "And the kingdom?" Elara asked. "Divided." Kael's expression darkened. "Some nobles supported Darian's coup. They believed I was too weak, too sentimental, that I cared more about the people than about power." "They were right. You do." "Yes, and I won't apologize for that." He looked at her steadily. "But it means I have enemies. People who will spend years trying to undermine me, who will look for any weakness to exploit." Elara's chest tightened. She knew where this was going. "You're a weakness," Kael continued quietly. "To them. A servant girl who somehow captured the king's heart. They'll come after you. Use you to hurt me. Then I'll fight them." Elara, "No." She struggled to sit up, ignoring Marin's warnings about rest. "You don't get to save my life and then push me away because it's dangerous. I've been in danger since the moment I dragged you out of that blizzard. I chose this." "You chose to save a dying wolf, not to become a target for every ambitious noble in the kingdom." "I chose you." Elara gripped his hand tighter. "Wolf or king, it doesn't matter. I chose you." Kael stared at her, something breaking and reforming in his expression. "The council won't accept it," he said. "A king marrying a commoner. It's unprecedented." "So set a precedent." "They'll fight me on this." "Let them." "Elara, they could make your life hell. They already tried." She smiled slightly. "I'm still here." Kael looked at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, genuine, surprised, full of wonder. "You're unbelievable," he said. "I know." He pulled her close, careful of her injuries, and just held her. "I'm going to ask you something," he said against her hair. "And you can say no. You should probably say no. But I'm asking anyway." "What?" Kael pulled back. His eyes were serious, intense, completely focused on her. "Marry me." Elara's heart stopped. "What?" "Marry me." His hands cupped her face. "Not because I need a political alliance, not because the council demands it, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Because you're the bravest person I've ever met. Because you saw me at my worst and saved me anyway." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I love you completely, impossibly, and I want the whole kingdom to know it." Elara couldn't breathe. "I'm a servant," she said weakly. "You're the woman who saved the king, twice. I have no family, no title, no dowry. You have courage, compassion, and a will stronger than steel. That's worth more than all the titles in the kingdom. Your nobles will revolt. Let them." Kael's smile was fierce. "I just fought a war to keep my throne. You think I'm afraid of angry nobles?" Elara stared at him, this impossible man offering her an impossible future. "Yes," she whispered. Kael went still. "Yes? Yes, I'll marry you." Tears streamed down her face. "You stubborn, reckless, beautiful idiot. Yes." Kael's answering smile could have lit the darkest night. He kissed her again, deeper this time, a kiss that sealed promises and futures and everything they'd fought for. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Kael rested his forehead against hers. "The council's going to lose their minds," he said. "Good. They deserve it." He laughed. Then his expression turned serious. "There's something else you need to know. About Sarah." Elara's smile faded. "What about her?" "She's been arrested." Ice flooded Elara's veins. "What? Why?" "For helping you break into Torrin's office. For theft of the housekeeper's keys. For—" Kael's jaw tightened. "Some of the nobles want to make an example, show that helping traitors has consequences." "She's not a traitor." "I know, but the law is murky. And there are people who want to hurt me through anyone connected to you." Elara's mind raced. "Where is she?" "The dungeons, awaiting trial." "Get her out." "Elara, I mean it." She struggled to stand, her legs shaking but holding. "She risked everything to help me. If she's punished for that, if she suffers because of me—" Her voice broke. "I won't allow it." Kael caught her before she could collapse, easing her back onto the bed. "I'll handle it," he said. "I promise." "But you need to rest." "How?" "What? How will you handle it?" Elara pinned him with her gaze. "The nobles want blood. They want to prove helping me was a mistake. How do you stop that without causing another political crisis?" Kael was silent for a moment. Then his expression shifted into something calculating. "The same way I'm handling our marriage," he said slowly. "I make it impossible to object." "I don't understand." "Sarah helped expose a treasonous conspiracy. She provided intelligence that saved the kingdom from civil war. That's not criminal behavior, that's heroism." Kael's smile turned sharp. "I'm going to publicly commend her, give her a position in the castle, make her untouchable. Will that work?" "It will if I make it a royal decree and dare anyone to challenge me." Elara stared at him. "You're going to start your reign by defying half the nobility?" "I'm going to start my reign by rewarding loyalty and punishing corruption. If the nobles don't like it," he shrugged, "they can adjust." Despite everything, Elara smiled. "You're going to be a terrible king." "I'm going to be a fair king." He kissed her forehead. "There's a difference." Over the next week, Kael was true to his word. Sarah was released from the dungeons and formally commended before the royal council. Kael gave her a position as the castle's head of internal affairs, a newly created role with authority to investigate corruption and abuse. The nobles sputtered. The ministers objected. Kael ignored them all. Then he announced his intention to marry Elara Vance. The council erupted. "This is unprecedented. A commoner cannot—" The bloodline must be preserved. Kael let them shout themselves hoarse. Then he stood, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. I have listened to your objections. I have considered your concerns, and I have made my decision. His gaze swept the assembled nobles. Elara Vance will be my queen. This is not a request. It is a decree. Anyone who challenges it challenges the crown itself. Silence fell. Lord Commander Garrett, still recovering from his injuries, stood slowly. I support the king's decision, he said clearly. Lady Vance demonstrated more courage and loyalty than most nobles I've known. She is worthy of the crown. One by one, other voices joined his. Ministers who'd seen Elara's evidence, soldiers who'd witnessed her protect Kael, even a few nobles who valued merit over tradition. Not everyone agreed, some still simmered with resentment. But the tide had turned. 3 weeks after nearly dying, Elara stood in the castle's great hall wearing a gown that cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. It was deep blue, embroidered with silver thread, fitted perfectly by seamstresses who'd worked day and night. She felt like an imposter. Stop fidgeting, Sarah whispered beside her. You look beautiful. I look ridiculous. You look like a queen. Elara glanced at her friend, now head of internal affairs, dressed in official robes, looking far more comfortable than Elara felt. Thank you, Elara said quietly. For everything. Thank you for giving me a reason to fight back. Sarah squeezed her hand. Now go. Your king is waiting. The great hall had been transformed. Flowers and banners draped the walls. Nobles and commoners alike filled the space. A deliberate choice by Kael, opening the ceremony to anyone who wished to attend. Elara walked down the aisle, her heart pounding. At the far end, standing before the throne, was Kael. He wore the formal regalia of the Alpha King, crown of hammered gold, cloak of deep crimson trimmed in fur. He looked every inch the warrior king, powerful and dangerous. But when he saw her, his expression softened into something tender and awed. Elara reached him, and he took her hands. You came, he whispered. You commanded it, she whispered back. I have to obey my king. But I'm not your king right now. I'm just a man who loves you. The ceremony was traditional, presided over by the High Minister. Words about duty and honor and the sacred bond of marriage. Elara barely heard them. All she could see was Kael. When the time came for vows, Kael spoke first. I vow to protect you, honor you, and stand beside you for all my days. I vow to value your wisdom as much as any counselor's. I vow to build a kingdom worthy of your courage. His voice dropped, meant only for her. And I vow to love you exactly as you are, for as long as I live. Elara's throat tightened. I vow to stand with you through whatever comes, she said. I vow to fight for this kingdom and its people. I vow to never let you forget who you are beneath the crown. She smiled through tears. And I vow to love you, stubborn, reckless, impossible man that you are, for the rest of my life. The High Minister pronounced them wed. Kael pulled her close and kissed her, and the hall erupted in cheers. When they finally broke apart, Kael lifted the crown from his own head and placed it gently on Elara's. It was heavy, impossibly heavy. But when she looked at Kael, at the love and pride in his eyes, it felt right. The feast that followed was lavish, music and dancing and enough food to feed the entire kingdom. Nobles who'd objected to the marriage made stiff congratulations. Common folk who'd heard stories of the servant girl who saved the king cheered wildly. Late in the evening, Kael pulled Elara onto the balcony overlooking the kingdom. The stars blazed overhead. The wind was cold but crisp. In the distance, lights from villages dotted the landscape. Regrets? Kael asked quietly. Elara leaned against him. Not even one. It's going to be hard, being queen. People will expect things, judge you, compare you to everyone who came before. Let them. She looked up at him. I didn't save you to live an easy life. I saved you because it was right. And now? Now I'm choosing this, choosing you, choosing to fight for a kingdom that's worth saving. She smiled. Together. Kael pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her. Together, he agreed. And somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, wild and free and alive. The howl echoed across the valley, and Elara felt Kael's arms tighten around her. "One of yours?" she asked quietly. "One of ours." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "The packs are returning. They scattered when I disappeared, but now—" His voice held something like wonder. "Now they're coming home. Because you're back. Because we're both here." Kael turned her to face him, the starlight catching gold in his eyes. "You saved more than just me in that blizzard, Elara. You saved everything." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the worst was behind them. But she'd learned that peace was always temporary in kingdoms built on power. The trials began 2 weeks after the wedding. The Great Hall was packed with spectators, nobles demanding justice, commoners seeking reassurance that corruption would be punished, soldiers who'd nearly followed traitors into civil war. The air was thick with tension and the weight of history being written. Darian was brought in first, still dressed in fine clothes but stripped of every symbol of rank. His hands were bound, his face was carved from stone, showing nothing. He looked at Kael with pure hatred. "All rise for King Kael Draven and Queen Elara Vance," the herald announced. Elara still wasn't used to hearing her name paired with Kael's like that. Queen. It felt borrowed, like a costume she hadn't quite grown into. But she straightened her spine and walked beside Kael to the thrones. Yes, thrones plural, because he'd had a second one commissioned and placed equal to his own, with her head high. The murmuring in the hall didn't escape her notice. Nobles who thought a servant had no place here. Ministers who resented a commoner wielding power. Let them talk. She'd survived worse than gossip. Kael sat, and she followed suit. The weight of the crown on her head was a constant reminder of how far she'd fallen and climbed in mere weeks. "Prince Darian Draven," Kael's voice rang out, formal and cold. "You stand accused of high treason, conspiracy to commit regicide, attempted murder of a royal council member, and crimes against the crown. How do you plead?" Darian smiled, sharp and vicious. "Guilty. Of everything except the charge of being wrong." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Explain," Kael said flatly. "You were weak, brother. You've always been weak, caring about peasants and wolves and honor." Darian spat the word like poison. "This kingdom needs strength, power, not a king who bleeds for every wounded animal he finds." Elara's hands clenched on the arms of her throne. "And your solution was assassination," Kael said. "My solution was leadership, real leadership. Not this—" Darian gestured at Elara with contempt. "This farce. You married a servant, elevated her to queen, and now you wonder why half the nobility wants your head?" "Careful, brother." Kael's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You're speaking about my wife." "I'm speaking truth. She's a nobody. A girl who got lucky. And you're so desperate for someone to see you as more than a weapon that you've confused gratitude for love." Elara stood before she realized she was moving. "You're right," she said clearly. Every eye turned to her. Kael looked at her sharply, but she kept her gaze on Darian. "I am a nobody," Elara continued. "I was a servant. I had nothing. No family, no title, no power." She walked down from the dais, approaching Darian until only the guards between them. "But that's exactly why I could do what you never could." "And what's that?" Darian sneered. "See past the crown." Elara's voice rang through the hall. "You looked at your brother and saw weakness because he cared about people. I looked at him and saw someone worth saving. You tried to kill him for political gain. I risked everything to keep him alive." She leaned closer. "So yes, I'm a nobody, but I'd rather be a nobody with courage than a prince with only ambition and poison." Silence crashed through the hall. Then slowly, someone started clapping. Lord Commander Garrett, still bandaged, stood and applauded. Then another soldier joined. Then another. The applause spread like wildfire. Soldiers, servants, even a few nobles who valued merit over bloodline. Darian's expression twisted with rage. "You think this changes anything? You think making a speech makes you worthy? You're still just a servant playing queen, and you're a prince playing prisoner," Kael interrupted, his voice cutting. "The difference is she earned her crown. You only tried to steal mine." He stood, moving to Elara's side, his hand finding hers. "The evidence against you is overwhelming," Kael continued, Multiple witnesses, signed documents, your own confession. The council has recommended execution. Darian's jaw tightened. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. But I'm not going to kill you, Kyle said quietly. Murmurs erupted. Elara looked at him sharply, but his expression was unreadable. You're my brother, Kyle continued. For better or worse, we share blood. So instead of execution, I'm sentencing you to permanent exile. You'll be taken to the northern border and released into the wilderness. No supplies, no protection, just you and the land. Darian's face went white. That's a death sentence. That's survival, Kyle said coldly. The same test I faced when your poison left me dying in a blizzard. If you're as strong as you claim, you'll live. If not, he shrugged, the wilderness is a fair judge. You can't. I'm the king. I can. Kale's expression was stone. Be grateful I'm giving you a chance. It's more than you gave me. Guards moved to drag Darian away. He fought, shouting threats and curses, but his voice faded as he was hauled from the hall. The room erupted in conversation. Some nobles objected to the mercy. Others praised the justice of it. Elara looked at Kyle. That was brutal. That was necessary. His hand squeezed hers. Executing him makes him a martyr. Exiling him makes him a cautionary tale. And if he survives, then maybe the wilderness will teach him what the castle never could. Torin's trial was shorter and far less dramatic. The former overseer had no allies left, no defense to offer. The evidence of embezzlement and conspiracy was damning. He'd tried to bargain, offering names and details of other corrupt officials in exchange for clemency. Kyle accepted the information, then sentenced him to 20 years in the kingdom's harshest prison. You wanted power, Kale said as Torin was led away in chains. Now you'll have plenty of time to contemplate what it cost you. The other conspirators received similar sentences, prison terms, fines, permanent banishment from positions of authority. Kale dismantled the corruption systematically, replacing every tainted official with people whose loyalty had been tested. Many of those people were common-born. The nobles hated it, but they couldn't deny results. 3 months after the trials, Elara stood in the throne room reviewing reports with Sarah. Grain production is up 15%, Sarah said, scanning documents. The new agricultural reforms are working. And the border villages? Fortified. The military presence has deterred most raids. The few that tried were... Sarah smiled slightly. Let's just say word spread quickly that the Alpha King's wolves are back and protecting the frontier. Elara nodded, making notes. Being queen was nothing like she'd imagined. It wasn't balls and jewels and leisure. It was endless work, meetings, decisions, policies affecting thousands of lives. She loved it. Your Majesty? Elara looked up. A young servant stood in the doorway, looking nervous. There's someone here to see you. She says she's... The servant hesitated. She says she's your mother. The world stopped. Elara's mother had died 8 years ago. Fever. She'd watched her buried. That's impossible, Elara said. I know, Your Majesty, but she's insistent. She has... The servant swallowed. She has your father's ring, the one you said was buried with him. Elara's heart hammered. Bring her in. The woman who entered was small, worn, with gray-streaked hair and eyes that were achingly familiar. She wore common clothes and moved with the careful steps of someone unused to castle grandeur. But those eyes... Elara, the woman whispered. No. Elara's voice shook. You're dead. I watched you die. You watched me nearly die, and I let you believe it finished. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Because your father and I had debts we couldn't pay. Dangerous people looking for us. We thought if you believed we were gone, you'd be safe. Safe? Elara's voice rose. I was 12 years old and alone. I know. The woman stepped forward. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But those people are gone now, dead or scattered. And when I heard that a servant girl named Elara Vance had become queen, her voice broke. I had to see. Had to know if it was really you. Sarah stood quietly, her hand on the knife at her belt, watching the stranger with sharp eyes. Elara stared at this woman who claimed to be her mother. Part of her wanted to believe it desperately. Part of her wanted to scream at the cruelty of this deception. Prove it, Elara said coldly. Tell me something only my mother would know. The woman smiled sadly. When you were 6, you found a baby bird that had fallen from its nest. Broken wing. I told you to leave it, that nature would take its course. But you refused. You made a splint from twigs and cloth, fed it for weeks until it healed. Her eyes locked on Elara's. You named it Hope, and when it flew away you cried for 3 days because you missed it, but were happy it was free. Elara's breath caught. No one knew that story. No one. Mama? The word came out broken, childlike. The woman nodded, tears streaming. Yes, baby, it's me. Elara didn't remember crossing the room, didn't remember starting to cry. She just found herself in her mother's arms, 8 years of grief and loneliness pouring out in great shaking sobs. I thought you were dead, she gasped. I thought I was alone. I'm here now, I'm here. Her mother held her tight. And I'm so proud of you, so proud of the woman you've become. They stood like that for a long time, 2 broken pieces finally finding each other again. When Elara finally pulled back, her mother cupped her face with work-roughened hands. My daughter, the queen, she said wonderingly. How did this happen? So Elara told her. Everything. The blizzard, the wolf, the choice that cost her everything and gave her more than she'd dreamed. Her mother listened in silence, her expression shifting from shock to awe to fierce maternal pride. You saved the king, her mother said when Elara finished. Of course you did. You've always had too much heart for your own good. I learned it from you, Elara said. You and Papa. You taught me that doing what's right matters more than doing what's safe. Her mother's smile was sad. And then we abandoned you to save ourselves. Some lesson. You were trying to protect me. We were cowards. Her mother's voice turned firm. But you're brave. Braver than we ever were. And I need you to know. She gripped Elara's hands. I don't expect anything from you. I don't want your title or your wealth. I just wanted to see you, to tell you I'm sorry, and that I love you. Elara's throat tightened. Stay. What? Stay here, at the castle. Not as the queen's mother, just as my mother. Elara's voice steadied. I lost you once. I'm not losing you again. Her mother's eyes widened. Elara, I'm nobody. So was I. Elara smiled through tears. Apparently that doesn't matter anymore. That evening, Elara brought her mother to meet Kael. He'd been in a council meeting, but he dismissed everyone the moment Elara entered with a gray-haired woman who looked terrified. Kael, Elara said, this is my mother. It's complicated, but she's alive, and I'd like her to stay. Kael studied the woman with those sharp, amber eyes. Then he smiled, genuine warmth that transformed his face. Welcome, he said simply. Any family of Elara's is family of mine. Elara's mother stared. You're really the king. And you're really the woman who raised the bravest person I've ever met. Kael's expression turned serious. Which means you have my gratitude and my protection. Both are absolute. He meant it. Within a week, Elara's mother was settled in comfortable quarters near Elara's own. She took no title, accepted no special treatment beyond safety and security. But having her there, having family again, healed something in Elara she hadn't realized was still broken. The seasons turned. Winter gave way to spring, and with it came the first real test of Elara's reign as queen. A delegation arrived from the eastern kingdoms, nobles seeking to establish trade agreements and political alliances. They were shown into the throne room with great ceremony, expecting to negotiate with King Kael. Instead, they found both thrones occupied. King Kael, Queen Elara, the lead ambassador said, his tone carefully neutral. We've come to discuss trade routes and treaties. Then discuss them, Kael said. My queen handles all economic negotiations. She has my full authority to make binding agreements. The ambassadors looked uncomfortable. One cleared his throat. With respect, Your Majesty, in our kingdom, economic matters are handled by men trained in my kingdom, Elara interrupted smoothly. Economic matters are handled by whoever is most qualified. And I've spent months studying trade routes, tariffs, and production outputs. So unless you'd prefer to waste time questioning my competence instead of negotiating favorable terms for both our kingdoms, She smiled pleasantly. I suggest we begin. The ambassador's jaw tightened, but after a long pause, he nodded. The negotiations lasted 3 days. Elara held her ground on every point, refusing to accept unfavorable terms while finding compromises that benefited both sides. She knew the numbers cold: grain production, mineral exports, textile manufacturing capacity. By the 3rd day, the ambassador stopped talking down to her and started treating her as an equal. The treaty they signed was the most favorable trade agreement the kingdom had secured in a decade. When the delegation left, Lord Commander Garrett approached Elara in the corridor. "Well done, Your Majesty," he said gruffly. "Thank you, Commander. I admit, when His Majesty first announced his intention to marry you, I had doubts." Garrett's expression was earnest. "But you've proven yourself 10 times over. You're a true queen, one this kingdom is lucky to have." Coming from Garrett, a man who'd served the crown for 30 years and suffered wounds defending it, the words meant everything. "That means more than you know," Elara said quietly. Garrett nodded once, then continued down the hall. Elara stood there for a moment, letting the reality sink in. She'd done it, actually done it. She'd gone from outcast to queen. And not just in title, in truth. The kingdom was beginning to accept her. That night she found Kael on the same balcony where he'd proposed, staring out at the stars. "You're brooding," she said, sliding her arms around him from behind. "Thinking. About? About how different everything is now." He turned in her embrace, pulling her close. "6 months ago, I was dying in the snow. Now I'm standing here with you, watching a kingdom heal, and I keep waiting for it to fall apart." "It won't." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Elara looked up at him. "Because we won't let it. We've faced assassins and poison and political coups. We can handle whatever comes next." Kael's expression softened. "When did you become so certain?" "When I realized I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living." She cupped his face. "We both are. Really living, for maybe the first time." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, a kiss that tasted of promise and future and home. When they finally broke apart, Kael rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered, "more than I have words for." "I love you too, even when you're brooding." He laughed, and the sound was lighter than she'd ever heard it. The months that followed brought their own challenges. A border dispute with the southern kingdoms required delicate diplomacy and a show of military strength. A harsh winter threatened food supplies, requiring careful rationing and emergency aid to remote villages. Nobles still grumbled about a common-born queen, though most had learned to keep their objections quiet. Through it all, Elara and Kael worked side by side. She handled domestic policy and economic development. He managed military strategy and foreign relations. Together, they reformed corrupt systems, elevated talented commoners to positions of power, and slowly, painfully slowly, began reshaping the kingdom into something fairer. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect, but it was better. And then, on a spring morning, exactly 1 year after Elara had dragged a dying wolf through a blizzard, everything changed again. She woke feeling strange, not sick exactly, but different, off balance. Marin took one look at her and smiled knowingly. "How long since your last bleeding?" the old healer asked. Elara thought back, counted days. Felt her heart start to race. 2 months. Maybe more. I've been so busy I didn't... She looked at Marin sharply. I think you should prepare His Majesty for some very important news." The test was simple. The results were not. Elara was pregnant. She sat in Marin's workroom, staring at nothing as the reality crashed over her. A child. She was going to have a child. An heir to the throne. "Are you all right?" Marin asked gently. "I don't know," Elara admitted. "I'm terrified and thrilled, and I have no idea how to be a mother to a future king or queen, the same way you've done everything else." Marin squeezed her shoulder, with courage and love and that stubborn refusal to give up that makes you who you are. Elara found Kael in the training yard, sparring with younger soldiers. He moved with lethal grace, teaching them techniques while simultaneously testing their reflexes. He saw her and immediately stopped, crossing to her with concern written across his face. "What's wrong?" Nothing's wrong. Elara took a breath. I need to tell you something. He followed her to a private corner, his worry intensifying. Elara, you're scaring me. What happened? She looked up at him, this impossible man who'd become her entire world, and smiled. I'm pregnant. Kyle went completely still. He couldn't seem to finish the sentence. Going to have a baby. Our baby. She took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. In about 7 months. For a long moment, Kyle just stared at her, his expression cycling through shock and wonder and something that looked almost like fear. Then he laughed, pure joy breaking through, and swept her into his arms, spinning her around. We're having a child, he said against her hair. We're actually having a child. Kale, put me down before you make me dizzy. He set her down but didn't let go, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. I love you, he said fiercely. I love you so much, and His voice caught. I can't believe I get to have this. You, a kingdom worth fighting for, and now a family. Elara's eyes burned with happy tears. We're going to be terrible at this. Probably. The nobles are going to lose their minds. Definitely. And our child is going to grow up thinking it's normal to have a father who turns into a wolf. Kyle grinned. I see no problem with that. They stood there in the training yard holding each other, as the future they'd fought for became even more real. The announcement was made 3 days later during a full court assembly. The reaction was exactly what Elara expected. Joy from common folk who loved a royal love story, cautious congratulations from nobles who saw an heir as political stability, and barely concealed resentment from those who still thought a servant had no business on the throne. But none of it mattered, because that night, lying in bed with Kael's hand resting on her stomach, Elara felt something shift. Not the baby, it was too early for that, but something deeper, a sense of rightness, of completion. She'd lost everything to save a dying wolf in a blizzard, and she'd gained a kingdom, a family, and a love that rewrote the rules of what was possible. What are you thinking? Kael murmured in the darkness. That a year ago, I was sleeping on a pallet in the servants' quarters, wondering if I'd ever matter to anyone. And now? Now I'm here. She turned to face him. With you. Building something that matters. Proving that kindness isn't weakness, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to look away. Kael pulled her closer. The girl who refused to look away. That's me. My queen. That's also me. His hand splayed across her stomach, protective and reverent. And soon, a mother. Elara's breath caught. That terrifies me more than anything else. We'll figure it out, together. He kissed her forehead, just like everything else. 7 months later, on a winter night when snow fell soft and silent outside the castle windows, Elara gave birth to a daughter. The labor was long and brutal. Maran and 2 other healers worked through the night while Kael paced outside the chamber, forbidden from entering by tradition but looking ready to tear through the doors anyway. When the baby's first cry split the air, Kael crashed through despite protocol, dropping to his knees beside the bed where Elara lay exhausted and triumphant. A girl, Marin said, placing the tiny, squalling infant in Elara's arms. Healthy and strong. Elara looked down at her daughter, red-faced and furious and absolutely perfect, and felt her heart break open in ways she didn't know were possible. Hello, she whispered. Hello, little one. The baby's cries quieted, her eyes, already shifting toward Amber, opening to stare at her mother. Kael reached out with trembling hands, touching his daughter's tiny fingers. She's beautiful, he said, his voice thick. She's perfect. What should we name her? Elara asked. They discussed names for months, debating options, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking at this tiny girl who existed because Elara had refused to walk away from a dying wolf, the answer was obvious. Hope, Elara said softly. We'll name her Hope. Kael's eyes filled. Like the bird you saved when you were 6. Like the thing you gave me when I had nothing. Like what we're building here. Elara looked at him. Hope. He nodded, unable to speak, and pressed a kiss to both his wife and daughter's foreheads. The kingdom celebrated for a week. Princess Hope became an instant symbol, proof that even the most unlikely love stories could create new futures. Common folk saw her as one of their own, elevated to royalty. Nobles saw an heir that secured the succession. But to Elara, she was simply everything. 2 years passed in a blur of sleepless nights and tentative first steps, and a little girl who had her father's eyes and her mother's stubborn refusal to quit. The kingdom continued to heal. Reforms took root. The wolves returned fully to the northern territories, no longer hunted or feared, but respected as part of the land's natural order. And Elara, the girl who'd been cast out for saving a life, became known as one of the greatest queens in the kingdom's history. Not because of her policies, though those were sound, not because of her reforms, though those were needed, but because she'd proven that courage mattered more than birthright, that compassion wasn't weakness, that sometimes the smallest person could change everything by simply refusing to look away. On the 3rd anniversary of that terrible blizzard, Elara stood on the balcony watching snow fall, gentle this time, beautiful rather than deadly. Kyle joined her, Hope balanced on his hip, the little girl giggling and trying to catch snowflakes. "Do you ever regret it?" Kyle asked quietly. "Everything you gave up to save me?" Elara looked at him. At the man she loved, at the daughter they'd created, at the kingdom they'd built together. "Not for a single second," she said. Hope reached for her mother, and Elara took her, settling the toddler between them. "Story?" Hope demanded. "Want story." "What story?" Kyle asked, though he already knew. "Wolf story." It was Hope's favorite, the tale of how her parents met, simplified for a child's understanding, a brave girl who saved a magical wolf in the snow, and how that wolf became a king. So Elara told it, standing in the falling snow with her family around her, and remembered the moment that changed everything. A dying wolf. An impossible choice. A refusal to walk away, even when it cost her everything. "And they lived happily ever after?" Hope asked when the story ended. Elara looked at Kyle, saw the love and gratitude and wonder in his eyes. "Yes," she said, pulling her daughter close. "They really did." The snow fell softly around them, and somewhere in the distant mountains, wolves howled their ancient songs. Not in mourning or warning, but in celebration. The kingdom had a queen who'd proven that the smallest act of courage could echo through generations, that refusing to look away, even when the world demanded it, could change everything. Elara Vance had been a servant, an outcast, a nobody. Now she was a mother, a queen, and a legend. But most importantly, she was exactly who she'd always been. A girl who saw suffering and couldn't walk away. A woman who chose kindness over convenience, even when it cost her everything. A soul brave enough to believe that love, messy and impossible and fierce, was worth any price. And in the end, that was the greatest power of all. Not the crown on her head or the throne at her back, but the choice she'd made in a blizzard 3 years ago. The choice to save a life when everyone else would have walked away. The choice that proved, beyond any doubt, that sometimes the most extraordinary revolutions begin with the simplest act of refusing to look away. And that was a lesson that would echo through the kingdom for generations to come.